Welcome to IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Don.
Coming at you live from San Francisco, California.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
All right, greetings everyone, and welcome back to another great episode of IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Daniel Lowry, and in today's episode, it's all about the A+ series. That's right, the good old 220-902. That's right, not the 903. We did the 901. We're in 902. That's right. Joining us back in the studio yet again on that topic, our good friend, Mr. Wes Bryan. Wes, welcome back, sir. How's it going today?
Man, it's going great, and I'm glad you get those titles right. I even wrote some of the notes, and I could never figure it out. That's right. As Dan said, we are in the 902, continuing along in mobile devices. And really, you know, over the past few episodes, we've been dealing really with troubleshooting, right? Well, in this episode, what we want to look at as we steer away from things like, you know, our Windows operating systems, if you will, and things like professionalism and communication is really looking at things like troubleshooting, well, your mobile devices. So that's what we're going to look at. Some of the basic issues that you could see inside of a mobile device and mobile operating systems. And maybe you've seen earlier in this series. If you haven't, please go back and check them out. We definitely dived into things like the iOS, if you will, as well as Android. And, well, that's really where we're going to be sticking, you know, what we'll be sticking with when we talk about troubleshooting. However, keep in mind, doesn't matter if you're on one of these devices, if you're on something like a little phone, if you're on a tablet, when it comes down to it, mobile devices in general have a lot of, you know, problems or issues that you could be faced with that are kind of, you know, synonymous across the board, right? You know, regardless of what the device is. So let's go ahead. Let's address what this objective is. So you ladies and gentlemen out there that are following along know, because we certainly can't put some of these objectives names or in our titles here. This is given a scenario, troubleshoot common mobile OS and application issues with the appropriate tools.
So explosions.
That's right. That's right. Right. Absolutely. We're going to talk about things like, what not to do when you see a swollen battery, right? What not to do.
Put your face as close. Don't do that.
That's right. What not to do when it comes to, you know, cracked screens, right? We just sit there and we rub our fingers across the glass. Well, yeah, we're not going to do that.
I need to check my blood sugar. I guess that's good.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Medic.
And stitches, please.
That's right. So let's go ahead and we'll dive into the very first topic that they really call out here, and they talk about some common symptoms are a dim display. Now, dim display
That's not a very nice thing to say about your display.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you know, I mean, you know, exactly. Yeah. But one of the things that you have to worry about with a dim display more than anything, it really is a setting. And when it comes down to it, a lot of times it's just a slider bar. In fact, you can see, let me show you here on my desktop here. You'll see that we've got, again, the common mobile operating systems that we've been dealing with here. And if I kind of slide down from the top, you'll notice that we have this little slider bar, and you'll notice the little sun icon on the left-hand side here. Now, understand that this really isn't adjusting anything on our screen, right?
It's causing the eclipse right now.
That's right. That's actually it. And you know, that's interesting that Dan says that, because at the time of this recording, this is, maybe some of you guys will know, this is the great American solar eclipse. And not that it's only happening in America, right? But it is coming across America as we speak, right? So I am actually controlling that out there.
With your Samsung S4.
That's right. So I'm dimming the entire Earth, right?
Good job on controlling that, Samsung.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's a lot of power right there in your hands.
It's pretty impressive.
Right? So keep in mind, sometimes that can be all it is, right? And here, let me tell you where this gets me in trouble sometimes. When you go out and you're in front of, or under, I guess I should say, bright sunlight, and you can't see anything, right? When you're in direct sunlight, these screens really don't do too well, even if they're on the brightest setting. It's even worse if you're like me. You're like, okay, I want to take some power saving best practices. I'm going to kind of dim the screen out because Dan and I are in the studios right now. In fact, I can kind of rubberneck and look over at his phone, and I know that his screen settings are set really dim. Why? Well, because for half-hour periods at a time, we're not looking at our screen, so there's no reason to have it chewing up the battery. Problem is, if Dan had to take a phone call right away, it says, you know, okay, after this episode, it says, hey, let me step outside real quick. Well, you might not be able to see the slider bar, right? Because the moment you get into direct sunlight with a dim screen, it becomes next to impossible to see anything. So that could be very basically all that it is, right? It could be a setting like that. Make sure of course, that the device itself doesn't have physical damage, all right? And the reason I say that is because every mobile device has typically what's known as some kind of backlight source. In earlier days, and even in very, very, very small devices, you might have what's known as a side light. More than often, it's just a backlight, and a lot of times it's just a traditional OLED screen, right, that you would see more full size. They're very good for small form factor devices. So if it is a dim screen like that, also make sure, again, that it's not some kind of power-saving profile, right? You do have applications that you can put on your phone that, if you give them the right permissions, they can control control the power of your device and automatically dim the screen. And if that happens, that could be one of the reasons that you're seeing a dim screen, right? All right, so here's another one that happens to just about everybody, and sometimes even on a daily basis, and this is intermittent wireless. Now, when we look at intermittent wireless, there could be, a handful of things. I will tell you one of the most common things that happen, the cause, I should say, of intermittent wireless signals, right, is really just proximity to the access point.
Yeah,
right?
just on like the outskirts of the actual connectivity area of the access point, right? And you're just kind of like phasing in and out of it, or you maybe get a little power push or whatever, right? And you're picking it up, and it's dropping it, picking it up and dropping. It's very annoying.
Most definitely. And in fact, you mentioned this, I believe it was, Dan, when we were talking about just some of the features, we're talking about connectivity in general. I think you mentioned obstacles, things being in your way, right? If you've ever gone into a place, like for instance, one of the places I can tell you is if you have a lot of electromagnetic shielding. Now, I'm not talking straight. As you guys go on to more advanced security training, you'll learn about things called tempest shields and stuff. So I'm not really talking about the tinfoil hat. But if you go into a place that has a lot of electromagnetic shielding, you could see intermittent wireless from whatever the signal connection is, but a lot of times, more often than not, it's going to be proximity to the access point. Now, the other thing that could happen too is it could be a power saving setting. There again, it could be turning off things. If you have profiles, right, set, again, it could be something that it says if after a certain amount of inactivity, disable certain functionality or features within the operating system itself. So again, most commonly though, intermittent wireless signals are going to be really just relative, maybe not even to the device. Now, it could be on the access point side. We've already talked about that in other episodes, just talking about wireless networks in general and securing things like your SOHO environments. Could just be your access point. Could be causing the problem more than anything.
It's always a good time when somebody sticks the access point on top of the microwave at your break room, and then people start heating up their burritos.
That's right.
And you're going, why does my wireless keep dropping in and out?
That's right. And it really comes down to the, now we're talking about a standards issue too, right? You talk about a standards issue, 2.4 gigahertz spectrum's been around for a very long time. That's the ISM band. If you guys are not, ladies and gents out there aren't aware of it, that's the industrial, scientific, and medical band. And guess what? Like Dan mentioned, one of the things that's in that range is things like microwaves, right? So, older, I say other cell phones, but older just regular landline wireless phones,
yeah.
Cordless phones. Thank you. That's what I was trying to.
It's been so long since we've had to say
it really is, because some of them are going well beyond 2.4 gigahertz, you know, but it is, right? Again, it's a very congested type of communication frequency, and because of congestion, you could get intermittent wireless signals just because, again, the access point maybe can't handle all the bandwidth. But understand that's not really something that you can really control with the device itself. There, I mean, very limited the things that you can do. In fact, if we show my screen here, I kind of jumped into this in one other episode on accident by misdialing. Not that that ever happens. You guys know I'm kidding out there that have followed along with me with my typing here. But you do have what's known as an RSS indicator, or RSSI, if you will, relative signal strength indicator. Not much that you can really tweak here, right? And it's not only things like your wireless. You'll see that this is also talking about global systems, mobile, and LTE, right? So even if you're talking, they're talking wireless here more than anything else, so I would only assume that they're talking Wi-Fi. But again, keep in mind that we're not talking just Wi-Fi when we talk about any kind of mobile device. We're also talking about things like, for instance, your cellular communications too. But again, kind of limited as to what you might be able to fix with that. All right. Now, the next thing could be, this could be user error, and I have seen that, and they do call out no wireless connectivity versus intermittent wireless connectivity. Now, there's quite a few things. Oh, well, I say quite a few things. There's a handful of things that could really be the problem here. Understand that in any one of these issues so far that we've talked about, it could be the fact that you've got a damaged device. And not likely when it comes to the wireless adapter. A lot of times the components outside of like the GPU or the CPUs that are in them, because you can fry them, and the batteries more specifically, most of the components in a lot of these devices, they have a very long life, and a lot of times they outlive the devices that, service, if you will. But one of the things that it could be the fact that the wireless adapter is turned off, right? That could be no connectivity. Let me show you what I mean here. In fact, if we kind of zoom out here and I bring you back to that setting, we've kind of looked at this, right? Enabled versus disabled. If I disable the wireless device, well, guess what? That's going to mean that I'm not going to have any wireless connections, right? So it could be just as simple as a button that you've pushed. I know I've done that before when I've tried it in Android, right? When I've tried to swipe that menu, or if you're in your iOS device, swiping up from the bottom, there you go. You've got your little wireless connection button right there. Now with this one, I really don't want to disconnect it yet. I will here in a second, but we will lose the ability to see the screen because of the fact that it is, well, in fact, that one's kind of interesting. This one also kind of kicked me out too. So let's go ahead and see what's going on with that one. I might have to, yep, we want to watch it. Apparently this one did reboot. So again, you can see sometimes it does cause issues, so we do want to be careful with that one.
Prime example of it, right?
Yep,
here on the show.
Absolutely. I'll kind of go ahead and what we'll do is we'll just reboot this phone. And again, you see when you have that was an intermittent connection there too, that it does cause problems, right? But there again, this wireless, it could cause problems. Now, I will tell you, one of the things that they do call out on the exam, while we're here, we might as well go ahead and tackle this one. I know it's I'm jumping down on the list and our objectives there on you, Dan. Going off of the beaten path, right? Why do we have notes anyways? Is the fact that, unable to broadcast to an external monitor. That is something that can happen. And if you're unable to broadcast to an external monitor, it could be a Wi-Fi setting, right? It really kind of depends on, about what you're talking, what is the setting that might be causing the issue. One of the things that can cause the issue is just the fact that Wi-Fi is disabled. In fact, let me go ahead and show you while I'm rebooting this device here. I'll show you what I'm saying. In fact, while this is rebooting over there, we'll go ahead and we'll jump into our iPad here. Now with the iPad, notice that I do have, let's see if we can bring this up. I have what's known as AirPlay going, right? That's your screen sharing software there in iOS, right? But what happens, right? Here's no wireless connectivity and unable to communicate with an external monitor or broadcast to an external monitor. What could be the problem? Let me show you. Here's another setting that might get flipped and you don't even know it, and that's the little airplane mode up here. Notice that we have airplane mode. This can cause all kinds of havoc if you're not paying attention. In fact, let me see if I can get into that. It might just be simple as turning it on. Now, if I go into airplane mode, one of the things, I'm kind of moving the screen back here in the background, you'll notice that you don't see anything moving, right? One of the reasons you can't see it is I'm no longer broadcasting to my MacBook, right? I can't broadcast to the external monitor. So that's another reason. No wireless connectivity could be the fact that you've got airplane mode turned on. If you do, it turned off all of the radios within the device, whether it's the wireless adapter, whether it's a cellular adapter, or whether it's a Bluetooth adapter. So let me go ahead and take it out of and you see it closed down because wireless came back on. Let me go ahead and take it out of the airplane mode, and just real quick, I kind of have to relaunch my software here.
It's funny, Wes, we turn off all the communication stuff inside of our device and it stops communicating.
That's right. Imagine that how that works, right? Now, if I go back to, and I want you guys to kind of see this, and let me leave this open because this is what I seen once I rebooted or turned airplane mode off. I seen all of these devices that AirPlay or the screen sharing software would allow me, right, to see. Once Wi-Fi came back on, now I can broadcast again to the external monitor. So you do have that ability. You just have to keep in mind what might be actually causing the problem. So if no wireless connectivity, one of the things that might happen, like we've talked about, is that the Wi-Fi adapter might be turned off. You might have something like your proximity to the the access point. That's one that I didn't mention. It also comes in hand, or comes into play if I'm too far away from the wireless access point. Guess what? I don't get any wireless connectivity. That's just as simple as that. I can't communicate with the AP. No connectivity. Airplane mode was another big one, and that does happen. And sometimes people forget that they turn this on and they don't understand why they can't communicate. Or if we can go real quick back to my screen here, again, it could be something where you're using those quick settings, and all I had to do was accidentally push this little airplane button right here, and all of a sudden everything is disabled. Now, I went ahead and I got this Android device turned back on. I went ahead and rebooted here in the background. Let's go ahead and let's see, now that I've turned on the Wi-Fi adapter again, if I can connect back to it. Hopefully we can here in a second. We'll see, and there it goes, right? So we are connected again. So there are quite a few reasons you can see why you might not be able to do something like broadcast to an external monitor, or you might have zero wireless connectivity. In fact, that keeps crashing on me. So we'll go ahead and just leave this, we'll leave the Android off for just a bit, and we'll continue working with iOS. All right, so the next thing that we have to worry about is no Bluetooth connectivity. Now again, Bluetooth connectivity could be another one of those where it's just simple as a disabled Bluetooth setting, right? When we talk about a disabled Bluetooth setting, it could be something like something as simple as the fact that, again, you're using one of those quick buttons, right, quick launch buttons, and what ends up happening is you go to connect, you go to turn something on, you go to increase the brightness on the screen, you swipe down or swipe up depending on whether you're an Android or whether you're an iOS here, and instead of increasing the brightness on the screen or decreasing, dimming the screen, you end up hitting a button that actually turns off Bluetooth, right? So for instance, here on our screen, if I swipe up from the bottom, again, we get, let me try that again, we get the little Bluetooth signal, right? And the Bluetooth signal, again, shows me that Bluetooth is disabled on this device. But it's just as simple as hitting a button, and you can see it changes to Bluetooth on. But there again, if I'm going to do something like dimming the screen like I just did, and I end up hitting either the, in this case, I just hit the wireless, so probably have to reboot that again. I end up turning off Bluetooth. Well, now I no longer have a connection to the device. Let me go ahead and reboot that for a second here, and we'll go ahead and see if we can get back into the device.
Again, a good prime example of how easy it is to do this. You're going to accidentally click on stuff. Love touchscreens. They're amazing, but they definitely have their cons.
Yeah, they do. And for you guys out there that are in A+, and well, I would say for me who teaching you this stuff, it might seem simple. It's simple to mess up as well. But for somebody that doesn't understand these settings, maybe they don't read the user manuals, right? Maybe they just, oh, well, I can kind of figure out, flip my way through it. Or maybe you're supporting somebody that, maybe the older generation, I'm certainly not picking on anybody. Maybe you need to let them know, hey, that was your issue. All it was just, as simple as a setting.
I'll give you a prime example. My dad has 2 Facebook accounts because he thinks he has to have one for each one of his devices. So it's not his fault that he doesn't realize that what a cloud service is and that it's everywhere as long as you have internet connectivity. He thinks, oh, I have an app, I install it on my device, and that's where that works. If I want it on the other device, I've got to install it and create an account and do the whole thing. And you think it's it's contained within the device itself. So that is something you're definitely going to have to deal with. As Wes said, sometimes you're dealing with people that aren't as familiar with technology as we may be. So you got to be prepared for that.
Yeah, and that's where your professionalism and communication skills come into it. Just don't assume, right? And don't take it for granted, and don't downplay whatever the end user's problem might be, because you could have seen it 100 times, but it might be the first time that person's seen, seen whatever the issue might be, and it might be very serious to them, right? So do keep that in mind. Now that I've got everything kind of rebooted here with the Samsung, or in this case the Android device, let me show you here too, inside of the Android device up there at the top. Let me go ahead and swipe some of this stuff off of there. Notice that we also have that Bluetooth button there that we could accidentally hit, and it could disable your Bluetooth. Now, some of the other things in Bluetooth really could be the device is not paired. In fact, Dan and I were talking about this before we started this, and you mentioned this one. It's the fact that the device isn't paired. It could be the fact that maybe the device is paired, and whatever the other device might be, it might not be charged. Right, I have wireless earbuds, right, and they're Bluetooth, more specifically Bluetooth earbuds, and if they don't have any power, Well, guess what? It doesn't.
They don't work
doesn't
too well,
matter.
do they?
Right, exactly. It doesn't matter if they're paired.
I had to tell this to a user one time.
Sure.
Electrical devices use electricity. That's how they work. So if there's no electricity, it no worky.
That's right. You know, the other thing, too, that you sometimes have to worry about, and we've kind of showed in past episodes, is when you're pairing the devices together, you have a security code that you might have to enter. Sometimes it could just be a verification that says, hey, you're pairing a device, make sure this code matches on the device that you're pairing with, and if it's a different code, you close it down, right? But sometimes you could have to manually enter a code. It could be something as simple as 000 or 40000, and make sure I get all the zeros right. And it allows them to enter that trust relationship, right? But there again, it really depends on the device. Now, it also, that pin, you know, if you don't enter it right, just turn the devices on and turn them back on, and then go over through the process again. All right. Now, you know, we did kind of mention can't broadcast to external monitors, right? And one of the things that it can broadcast to external monitors, I showed you, was airplane mode could be turned on, right? That you'll lose the ability to be able to broadcast, right? Because it turns all the radios off. Might as well say that by association, if Wi-Fi is turned off or disabled, I can't broadcast to an external monitor. Now, I will be careful with this one because there's also cable connections that I've thrown in this list. And with cable connections, you have to make sure that the setting on the device that you're connected to is set right. Maybe the source could be. The other thing that you have to worry about, too, is things like HDMI. Now, you might say, well, wait a second, what's the problem with HDMI? Well, HDMI has built into the protocol something known as HDCP. If I get this acronym right, I always forget this one, and that's HD, so high definition for HDMI, high definition content or copyright protection. All right, and built into that cable and built into the device, and this, you have to worry about this with things like iOS, right? Some people were complaining because they bought something, you know, they bought a movie in Netflix, right? Or they have Netflix, and why can't they just hook their iPad up to an HDMI splitter and run, or HDMI, and run it out to their television and broadcast it over television? Well, that's because iOS honors the high definition content or copyright protection.
Big Brother is watching.
That's absolutely right. And just because we don't think they are doesn't mean they're not, right?
That's exactly right.
So, tinfoil
It's 1984, baby.
That's right, absolutely. So it could be something like that, right? It could be a security setting, right? And there's nothing you can really do, and I'm not advocating finding ways to get around copyright protection. That's not what we're advocating, but it could be something as simple as that. It could be a security issue. The other thing that I also want to do, and this is something I can kind of show you, and I've kind of shown you here in the iOS as well. iOS is, broadcasting there is to their AirPlay software is essentially their type of, you can't see it, there we go, AirPlay. Or not air sharing, but I'm sorry, I keep saying air sharing. AirPlay is their, broadcasting over a wireless communication. Well, you also have that inside of your Android device too. One of the easiest ways to see this is actually, let me get out of here and go to settings. If you go to settings and you bring up Wi-Fi, understand that sometimes it might be vendor specific, and that's just because Samsung does things a little bit different than maybe Google and stuff. And I know that Google with their Pixel, their settings might be a little bit different. But for instance, notice that down here at the bottom I have Wi-Fi Direct, right? And if I select Wi-Fi Direct, notice it says stop. Well, that might be a good indication as to why Wi-Fi Direct isn't allowing you to broadcast to an external monitor. So again, a lot of times it's just setting issues. It could be a cabling issue if you're talking about directly tethering to an external monitor, but for the most part, these are just some of the basic settings that you should be looking at. Now, Dan, I know I'm looking at this list here and I'm looking at our time, but I think it's going to be time to, well, insert the comma in this episode.
I like the way you put that, my good man, and you're exactly right. We're a little short on time for this episode, but we've got plenty more information to walk through as far as common OS issues, so and mobile devices, that is. So definitely join us back for that part 2. Wes, we'll see you there. I know we will. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this episode, but it's time for us to sign off. For IT Pro TV, I've been your host, Daniel Lowry.
And I'm Wes Bryan.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.